I think going forward, the future CMO has to be able to do most everything, to use that phrase, is because, number one, of the environment in which we're operating in, globally and locally. So you're looking at an environment where economic change is significant, be it positive or negative. And I guess more particularly technological change is just at an absolutely awe-inspiring pace. And the CMO being the person, in my view, in an organisation who is best positioned to drive that organisation forward because they're totally market focused, has to be in a position and have enough bandwidth to be able to, look at what the market wants, look at how you fund that internally, look at how you develop a product proposition to meet that need. Literally has to be involved in all aspects of not just the marketing function, but actually the entire function of the organisation. And by that what I mean is, a CMO who is not wholly financially driven as well in terms of the bottom line for an organisation, the revenue growth targets, the investment required to drive the business forward. Unless they're wholly focused on that as well, I think they run the risk of being ineffective. I would strongly believe that there is nobody in an organisation other than the CMO who is in the best position to actually drive an organisation forward, because they're the one person in the organisation that is wholly externally focused, or if they're not externally focused, I guess they should be. So they may have a team around them who are functional experts, be it in advertising, be it in research, be in product design, but the CMO is essentially the person who is looking at the marketplace, who is identifying where the opportunities are, who is looking at the competitive landscape and looking at how the organisation responds. And if that is not absolutely central to driving an organisation, I actually don't know what is. So that is why they have to be. The reality is, in a lot of organisations, they may not be, or they may not see themselves as being in that role. So I would say that the onus is very much on a CMO to actually make themselves relevant. And one of the themes of my presentation earlier is actually that I think if a CMO is truly effective in an organisation, then the title CMO and CEO are totally interchangeable. A individual in an organisation who is focused on where to take the business, who is market and customer driven, and then who has the expertise in-house to make it happen, is de facto the CEO. Focusing on any international market obviously, requires the marketing professional to draw on all the skills that they have learned at a local level. So essentially, what you're still really focused on is understanding the consumer in that marketplace, understanding local nuances, be they, how websites are designed, like what language you use, and a lot of the very kind of obvious things to state. I guess when you mentioned China there, I would see it as being kind of international to the power of 50, because in the China market, you have to be totally conscious of the cultural differences in that market. You have to understand the political backdrop in which you're operating in order to understand even the psyche of the individual, never mind, what their actual consumer demands might be. So I guess, certainly in that China context, going back to the quote earlier about a CMO needing to do most everything, I mean, that is truer in no other market. How your organisation behaves is very much driven by, the communist society in which they grew up, how they respond to directives, how the consumer perceives to be seen, are so complex that the first thing I would say is that you need to educate yourself as wholly as you can in all aspects of the society, and not just the pure consumer side of things. I think the other thing obviously you have to do, which is stating the obvious, but you kind of have to identify, particularly in a market that is the scale that China is, like who your core focus is and your core audience is, and you have to be much more clinical about that in a market that is the size of China. So from a consumer point of view, what's called the 90s generation in China is obviously a hugely attractive generation. They were born in the 90s. They do think differently to their parents' generation. They are more influenced by kind of cultural norms outside of China, and yet they still have all of the heritage and psyche of actually what it means to be Chinese and grow up in China. So it's probably a very broad statement, but I guess the starting point has got to be to understand the market holistically, all aspects of it, the economics of it, the political landscape, you know, as well as obviously the consumer movement. So I think the key focus for marketers in 2015 is actually to throw out the old rule book. So if you haven't done so already, and many marketers I think will probably have done that already. But by that what I mean is that the days of the fixed 3-year plan where little or nothing changes are well and truly gone. And if you don't have that culture and environment within your organisation and your marketing organisation already, now's the time to make that happen. Ensure you surround yourself with people who have a finger on the pulse, who know what the market is looking for and demanding in any given month or period or year, and ensure that you're well positioned to respond to that. I think, you know, if you'd asked me 10 years ago, today, or indeed if you ask me in 10 years' time, what is the other key thing marketers should focus on? It has to be financial literacy. And by that what I mean is, you know, no marketer can absolutely ensure they optimise their impact on an organisation if they are unable to demonstrate the impact of their activity on the P&L and the balance sheet of an organisation. So if you do nothing else in 2015 but actually shift up a gear to a point where you can stand in front of a board and tell them, you know, why they need to invest in a plan, why they need to either spend money or enter a new market, if you can demonstrate that in terms of the ROI for the board, then there is absolutely no reason why marketing doesn't move absolutely centre stage in the organisation.